Hello, good afternoon, everyone. And again, my name is Marilyn for those who haven't seen us here. And I'm the founder and CEO of Customized Training Solutions Private Limited, or CTS. And we are passionate about helping leaders and organizations who are continuous learners and action takers to transform and thrive in all aspects by co creating customized programs with the world class resources. We have served over 3,000 leaders from over 30 countries in different industries, including Petronas, Sony Mobile, PruLife UK, Ayala Group, Chevron, Tencent, Jollibee Foods Corporation, and Shell, to name a few. Experts said that the pandemic will last for the next 3 to 5 years, and this is why we are organizing several interventions, including this interview, to help leaders who don't know how to stay relevant and adapt to the new normal, those who find it stressful to lead and ensure performance of a remote team, and of course those who are afraid that they can't keep their team or their business. So to be able to stay relevant and continue to lead effectively in any situation, um, we would like to explore several insights from some leaders that we interview on a weekly basis. So today I'm super excited, and it's my great pleasure to introduce our leader. Hasan Sharif has a background in consulting and helps others improve the quality of their lives by creating more time, energy, and wealth so that they can focus on what most important to them and what matters to them, right? And over the 30 years, Hassan has delivered big, hairy product programs across multiple industries and countries. Hassan is a passionate servant leader and people developer, creating and maintaining supportive coaching environment for individuals and teams. He's originally from New York City, and Hassan now lives in Melbourne, Australia. So without so much further ado, I'd like to bring in Hassan. Hi, Hassan.
Hi, Mary Lynn. How are you?
How are you? I'm good. Thank you for asking. And I'm super excited for our conversation today. So let's, jump in right away so everyone can actually learn from you. And so, actually, the first three questions we will ask you is mainly to understand from which perspective you're actually coming from. And then the 3 to 6 question will be more I would say the juicy or meaty part of our conversation.
Okay.
And the 7 to 8 question is your chance to have the Miss Universe questions. So, to start with, please feel free. This is not so much of a question, but it's more of like you sharing with us your leadership experience, your influencers, perhaps, and those who actually contributed on why you are leading the way you do at this point in time. So feel free to go ahead.
All right. Well, first of all, I just want to say thank you, Mary Lynn. I'm pretty honored to be a guest on your show. I know that when we met, we had a really interesting conversation. And when I found out, some of the things that you're doing in your life, I was inspired. So for you to ask me to come on and
Yeah.
share with your audience is a huge honor for me. So thank you for that. As you mentioned in the introduction, I'm from New York City, and I was very fortunate to actually get turned on to an internship program pretty early. So just coming right out of high school, I had the opportunity to become an intern for multiple summers for the
Mhm.
company that I continue to work for today. So it's a large global technology and management consulting firm. And one of the early lessons there was really just about the fact that leadership in and of itself was something to be focused on. So I remember a number of experiences where we got a chance to go through training programs, talk about what leadership meant to us, who were leaders that we respected even at a young age, and it started to develop, at least for me, a bit of an awareness. And through my career, I've always focused on, well, what do I think is a good leader? And quickly I realized that it was more than just somebody who was in a position of leadership. It was really about those internal qualities that they had. And one lesson that I shared with you in the answers to the questions was, something that stuck early was that people will do far more for you because they enjoy the experience of working with you than they ever will because they have to. In other words, it doesn't matter that you're on some kind of org chart in a particular position. The relationship that you have with people is usually the thing that really kind of spurs on, that team quality, and people will, feel comfortable that you're taking them to a place that's actually good for them and not just for, let's say the outcomes that you're trying to reach. And so I found that to be really important. The other thing I know that is often the case with people who are new to leadership is that they believe that they are responsible for making people do things. And for me, really, leadership is about, and you mentioned it again in the introduction, it's about serving others. It's about figuring out how can you actually help make people better so that they're drawn to you. And then once you have that, you can now start to do things on a much broader level. So those are the kinds of things that really sort of influence me, as a young leader, as a developing leader. And even today, right? I'm not done. I'm not finished. I haven't arrived anywhere. To me, it's and I just happen to be a little bit farther down that path than I was yesterday.
Wow, that's good. And who are your influencers that you would say, that influence or that, inspired you to be the leader of who you are today?
Yeah. Well, there are lots and lots of influences, but a couple that I had a chance to just kind of think on are linked to some of my values. So a couple of the things that I really value are things like integrity, inspirational leadership, excellence, those kinds of things. And so there are some specific people from my past that kind of embody those things. So from an integrity and inspirational leadership perspective, I think of former President Barack Obama. Somebody who just kind of brought with him that aura of integrity. Another person who brings out for me excellence is Reverend A.R. Bernard out of New York City, who ran a pretty sizable church and I believe still does today. And just everything that he did exuded excellence. And that was just something that stayed with me. And then author John C. Maxwell, who potentially has written more books on leadership than anyone else. The thing that stays with me about him is just this continuous growth journey. And the fact that leaders are writers. So they're people who not only live, but really write about what it is that they do. And it continuously sparks that growth cycle for them. So those are just three. There are many others.
Wow, yes, that's awesome. And I actually like from how you've actually shared your experience, I already got confused. Which one will I write first or best? Because I mean, we're only in the first part of the interview, and I've already got a lot of juicy things from you. But I wrote down like the influencers that you've shared, mainly because this is the easiest way that our audience will probably anchor, like the values that you've shared. But my favorite, that the two favorite things I would say, from what you said, is leadership is not really about the position. It's about the experience that and the relationship that you give to them, right? Which makes really the difference on how will they actually act on things that they're supposed to do, or even the things that they're not supposed to do but they would love to do for you, right, to support you with. And the second one is, you've mentioned about service and being a servant leader as your preferred style, right? And
Yes.
It's about, again, starting with yourself, being able to lead yourself and being a good example to others. And the other one that actually is in my head is always making others better. And and that's what leaders is for, to create more leaders after all, right?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. One of the things that I often hear amongst the circle that I hang in is, how do you spell leadership? And it's EXAMPLE, right? You have to lead by
Yes.
example. And if you can't lead yourself, which, let's be clear, it's not always the easiest thing to do. It's a continuous journey. But if you can't lead yourself, then you kind of really haven't earned the right to lead others. And when you can do it, then it's really just about showing other people what's possible, right? Particularly if you have a purpose, if you can be persistent, if you can develop a consistent and, I guess, regular work ethic. So it's not something that you just do once and the work stays done. It is a constant, piece of work that you engage in, because our default is probably not, to continue to do things that take us to the next space. In other words, every day there's got to be at least another step forward.
Yes, thank you for answering my next question on leadership and making it sound so simple for us
Well,
by
it's
defining
interesting.
it with one word, which is an example. Leadership is being an example or giving that, that uh, or exuding that confidence as well, to be an example, or to, to show them the way, to walk the talk, I would say. Right. So
Yes.
thank you so much for giving that to us. And so, and I made mention earlier, during my introduction, right, that um leaders are having like some difficulties or challenges in the current situation. And I just wanted to understand better from you on how would you actually define and describe the next normal, because this is what we've been hearing a lot in the last few years, right? And so
Yeah.
for you, how would you actually define it?
Yeah, it's interesting. When I think about it, I think of the next normal, and I'm glad you call it that, because oftentimes we hear people say, "Oh, I can't wait until things get back to normal." I don't
Yes.
think things are going back to normal. So,
True.
that's a defining characteristic, I think, of many of the things that we've experienced as a people on this planet, is that there are
Mm-hmm.
things that happen, and then we figure out what happens next. So, to me,
True.
next normal is just the state of our post-pandemic world. And when I
Mm-hmm.
say post-pandemic, I don't think of after the pandemic. In other words, there's no more.
Mm-hmm.
It's the future, right? It's where we're probably going to see more pandemics. They're not only
Mm-hmm.
possible, quite likely, going to happen, and
Mm-hmm.
maybe with a bit more frequency. But in
Mm-hmm.
that future, it's about where people are learning and relearning how to thrive, whether it's mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, socially, economically, like all of those aspects of what it is to be human, be in relationship to other people, and do the things that we need to do in order to make sure that we're living good lives. We have to rethink all of those things in the context of this pandemic world that we now live in. So to me, that's kind of the next normal.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's really a great definition and reminder for us. I really like the part where you said that, like, some people or leaders are still expecting the old normal to come back, right? Which is never gonna happen, I would say, right?
Yeah, no,
I
I
mean,
think so.
it's been like how many years already? Like almost 2 years now. I mean, we're already in September. Wow, the time is really like, so fast, right? So like if you still expect that, the old normal will still come back, then you really have to ask yourself again. I mean, and that's also one of the reasons we're doing our best to, share all this and invite leaders like you, to share your insights on this, right? Because again, like, post pandemic, there will be like, changes will be very constant, and I would say like, it comes faster than in any point of time, right? And of course, we need to, continuously learn, and like you said, learn and relearn, and in different aspects of our life, because after all, we are humans, we're interconnected,
Hmm.
right? And we need to have that balance on the different aspects of our life, right? So I'm glad you shared that with us. It's a great reminder for everyone, right? And so, having said that, the next normal has created a lot of challenges and problem. But, as a consultant for over 30 years, what would you say, you've been working as a corporate leader and with corporate leaders, right? So what would you say would be the top three problems that, leaders would normally face as well?
Yeah, no, I thought that was a good question. And, it's interesting because I'm not sure that our current situation has defined a new set of problems. In other words, I think, some of the
True.
problems that we've seen in the past are still going to be the problems that we face today and tomorrow. And so the three that kind of came to mind for me were, number one, stay relevant, right? So how do I, maintain that level of relevance and the position of adding value to whatever my customer base might be. The
Mm-hmm.
second one is, creating stable and sustainable growth, right? No matter what industry I'm in, if I'm not growing, if I'm not moving forward, then effectively I'm moving backward. And then the last one is really attracting and retaining what I call transformative talent. So there's always been this notion of the talent war, the war for talent. How do you get people in? And I think this probably is one of those things that's more prevalent today, is that you have, sort of young people, next generations, who have quite a different expectation for what their journey is going to look like from a career perspective. And so how do you find the right people and make sure that you've created the environment that makes them want to stay and contribute the best that they can to your collective growth? So for me, those are probably, three of the top problems. And, there are probably many, many more that didn't come to mind, but those are the ones that I chose to share.
Yes, and I really agree with you on this. In fact, in the recent months, we've actually created several interviews as well, and a master class, which is more towards attracting and retaining transformative talents, like what you've said. And a lot of times when you hear, like, leaders, when I do my interviews, or when I have conversations, they always have, like, themes around, retaining their talents, right? And even attracting the right ones to start with, right? And imagine, like, if there are ways that you can actually, like, retain all these transformative talent, as you call them, that's gonna be like really amazing, right? Because I mean, that's where everything amazing starts with the
Totally.
right people in your team, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's not leave our audience as well hanging, in terms, we've shared the top problems, but for sure there are a few solutions that you can actually share with that. So, and part of that is, of course, the important capabilities and skills that, a leader must have to continue to thrive, and lead effectively in the next normal. So what are the capabilities and skills do you believe will be important and be able to help address the top problems that you've shared with us?
Well, it's interesting, right? Because when I thought about that question, I think capabilities and skills. I think about, maybe some of the hardcore technical things that people need to learn, or if you're in a particular industry, there's something specific that you need to learn about that product or service. But
Mhm.
what I think leadership, and leadership is, again, not a function of hierarchy. It's a function of calling and showing people the way. To me, it
Mhm.
kind of starts within, and I shared this earlier, but I believe that one of those qualities or capabilities, if you will, is
Mhm.
self-awareness. You need to understand who you are, what actually drives you. Do you have a value system? Do you have purpose? And that needs to permeate pretty much everything that you do. And the
Yeah.
second one is relatability, because again, if you're not able to relate to other people, then you may think you're leading, but if no one's following you, then you're just out for a walk, right? And I'm sure many people have heard that analogy before, but you kind of
Yeah.
have to make sure that you are relating to other people, understanding what it is that they want, and how do you actually help them get what they want. And that leads to sort of that third quality or capability from my perspective, which is one of service. Are you
Mhm.
adding value to whomever you're coming into contact with, whether you're leading them, whether you're working in conjunction with them, whether you're providing a service to them? How is it that their lives, their experience is enriched because of who you are, and maybe even the group that you're working with? So if you can leave a person, an organization, a group better, after you've left than when you found it, then you've provided some degree of value or service. So I think those are, for me at least, three qualities, call them capabilities or skills, because they can be learned, that leaders really do need to have in order to lead effectively.
And self leadership or self awareness is actually one of my favorite topic. In fact, I would say, because I think this is where a lot of leaders would would be lost in the first place, I would say, right? Because like, I remember, like, that analogy, if I can connect it to a new movie. I seldom watch a movie, but I watch this Shang-Chi. I hope I
Right.
pronounce it correctly. The
Oh, right,
Marvel
right, right. Yes.
movie, right?
Yes.
Shang-Chi. And like, he has having his internal conflict, I would say, where, he doesn't know where, who he is anymore, right? Like, at a certain point in time, because the parents are of different directions or values, where the father is like more on the villain and the
Yeah.
mom is the good one, right? And so he actually like got confused in that. And and the reminder that the auntie told him is that you have to look within you, you have to be yourself, and you have to be expressed, and you have to be acceptable of yourself. And that also like creates self-awareness, and being able to be yourself
Hmm.
is the greatest gift that you can ever give to the world, right?
Yeah.
But of course, before you actually give that to others, you have to be aware first of what you have, your superpowers, your weakness, and what's your purpose here in this world, right? And so that makes self-awareness one of the most interesting topic for me, or capability or skills, whatever you want to call it. Yeah, so I really appreciate that's the reason why I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. Yeah. So yeah, so having said that, I mean, like you've made mention about learning, relearning, and the importance of leadership as well, right? So my next question would be like, what do you believe will be the role of learning, leadership, and transformation in order to thrive in this next normal?
Um, so you do ask some challenging questions. If I think about learning, learning kind of goes through this transformation in and of itself. People are always looking for better ways to teach people and recognizing that people learn in different ways. But to me,
Mhm,
it's pretty simple, right? Learning is constantly challenging yourself to find more effective ways to add value, right?
mhm,
So if people want to learn new languages, they want to learn another skill, they want to learn, how to operate a piece of equipment, it's usually
mhm,
so that they can do something that they couldn't do before. And it
mhm,
usually translates to adding value. So I think that in this sort of next normal, it's really going to be about how quickly and how effectively can I learn so that I can actually increase my value. From a
mhm.
leadership perspective, I mean, that's the whole discussion that we've been having. But again, I
Right.
reiterate that it's showing others the way with authenticity. So, where is
Mhm,
it that we might want to go? I need to understand that from my own perspective. But if I'm
mhm,
going to be a good leader, then I also need to understand that from someone else's perspective. Because
mhm,
then my job becomes how to actually help those people get to wherever they're going. My job is not to judge where they're going. It's not to make them try to move in the direction that I want to go, but it's to equip them to do whatever it is that they feel called to do. And if I can do that enough, then I'll come back to a point that you made, which is we actually start to learn how to lead and develop other leaders. And once you get that multiplicative factor working for you, then you start to see positivity in lots of other places. And then the last one that you mentioned, which is transformation, to me is really about creating sustainable cycles to consistently produce desired outcomes. And I'm really focused on the sustainable cycles part, because there's a lot of things that we do because in the moment we think might actually give us an advantage of sorts. But sometimes those cycles that we create aren't sustainable. It maybe takes a lot more energy to do something the second or third time. But if we can
mhm,
figure out systems, if we can find ways of leveraging examples maybe that we see in nature so that we
mhm,
can get that sustainable cycle, and oftentimes figuring out how to keep that flywheel turning. For those of you who are familiar with that analogy, it takes a lot of energy to start, but once it reaches a certain momentum, then that momentum starts to work in your favor. The more areas in your life and in your business that you can put that kind of principle together,
mhm.
then the more you get transformation working for you. So those are kind of the ways that I think that those three elements are going to show up in the next normal.
Yes. Did you mention something about the wheel? Is that where did you read that in Good to Great? Is that the book? By
I've read It's a Great. The latest one that I think I saw the flywheel in, and I hopefully get this right. I don't like to misquote, but I think it would have been in Think Again by Adam Grant. And so, really, the whole notion of how much effort does it actually take to move something that's pretty difficult to get started, but if you keep
Mhm,
at it, the whole question then becomes, well, which turn of the wheel kind of switched it from the point at which it took a lot of
mhm.
energy to the point at which it starts generating the momentum on its own. But
Right.
that analogy comes up in lots and lots of places. The whole point is, can we put it into practice in our lives and in our businesses in order for
Mhm,
us to actually see the benefits that come from it?
mhm. And is there any like probably tips or techniques that you can share in terms of how can this be possible? Because I would say this is also one of the challenge for interestingly for like any size of a company, right? I mean,
Mhm.
whether you're new or you're just starting, even those companies that have been there for quite some time already, I mean, creating that sustainable cycle and having that what you've said, like a flying wheel going on already, like there's not much effort as when you just started, right? So are there anything that you can share in terms of how is this possible, or like how can you create that actually?
Yeah. Well, in my experience, you kind of have to plan for it, right? It's not something that's
Mhm.
just going to happen naturally by itself.
Yeah.
And if you kind of believe that, I'm sure that there's probably anomalies, but in most cases, it has to be a planned event, just like
Mm-hmm.
success. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you're not careful, there's always going to be the next thing that requires your attention. In other words, the tactical response. So if
Mm-hmm.
we don't make room for the strategic, if we don't make room for the plan, then
Mm-hmm.
we're just going to live in tactical. And then I think what we find is that we miss some opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
So, there's the plan, there's the roles. Someone's job has to be to look at things and say, how can we make this better? What
Mm-hmm.
systems can we put in place? How do we get those fast feedback loops where we can create them? It's not always possible, but where it is, how do we get, a good read on whether the last thing that we did is actually helping us to move forward? And what does
Mm-hmm.
that imply? Well, it implies that we actually have a place that we're trying to get to. So if we
Mm-hmm.
don't have a specific set of goals or targets that we're trying to hit, it's going to be pretty difficult for us to understand whether or not we're making forward progress. So for me, it's really just about making sure that, there is a plan in place, there are some roles and responsibilities around it, and then there's a way of measuring our progress so that when we need to tweak or adjust and try again, we now can understand, well, have we gotten closer to producing something that in a repeatable fashion allows us to get the outcomes that we want?
Wow, that's really great. Piece of advice or tips coming from you. I mean, like, I've been hearing a lot of these as one of their challenges, but it sounds so simple. And again, like what I got or what I learned from you sharing your tips is that also, like, being able to ask the right questions along the way, right? When you're doing the planning, visioning, and moving again the tactical to strategical, like what you've just to strategic, like what you've mentioned, right? So that things can be better and hopefully eventually, like be automatically happening in such uh, a way that it's gonna be like creating a continuous momentum, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Towards success. Yeah. So and that I would like to, like change gears here by asking you like a different question, but might be also related to what we've been actually discussing. If you have a magic wand and can use it, what will you do with it? Feel free to share with us as well why.
All right. So this is a really good one. And aside from the standard, okay, how many more magic wands would I use this magic wand to create? I thought, where would I go with this? And you could do the standard. Okay, I'd cure this. I'd make sure that everybody did that. And I guess what really kind of sat with me was this
Mm-hmm.
notion of we have no idea how things are going to turn out. So what
Mm-hmm.
I finally came up with is, if I had a magic wand, what I'd do is I'd temporarily endow humanity with the ability to foresee the often unintended consequences of our decisions. Right now, that's a
Wow.
bit of a mouthful, but the reason that I chose that was because I kind of believe that, many of us are driven by, our emotions, the things that we kind of feel in the moment. That's the default. And for those of us who, maybe learn a little bit from our parents and leaders and other positive influences, we learn to actually think a little bit more about, the future and where might, some of these desires that we have kind of take us. But I think often the default wins. I feel good now when I do this thing now. And so what I want to do is give people the opportunity to figure out, well, what might this decision look like down the road? I might think that this thing is a good idea now, but if I could see, 5 or 10 or 100 years into the future, would that have been the best decision to make? I would give us that ability temporarily, because even in giving that ability, it is probably going to have some unintended consequences. So if we at least got a glimpse for a period of time and remembered what that looked like, then maybe it changes the way that we start to make some of our decisions tomorrow once we don't have that ability any longer.
Yes, yes. It's all about making that decisions. I remember, like, I don't know if I read it or heard it or saw it, like, when you make a decision, um you have to think about it, like, will I be happy with this decision after 10 minutes? Will I be still happy about this decision after 10 months?
Yeah.
Will I be still happy with this decision after 10 years or so, right? So you have to ask that question before you make your decision. And I'm glad, without the magic wand, really, is this is already something that, you do with how you actually coach, mentor, or lead your team, I would say, right? And that's the reason, because you always, make sure that, I'm adding value to my clients, I'm adding value to others, I'm adding value to, whenever the mindset is like that, that you wanted to add value to others, that helps you also to, like, um think through of the consequences of the decisions that you make, right? And
Yeah.
even without the magic one, you do that, right?
Well, you try. And the thing is, you can't necessarily always know, but you also can't be afraid to kind of revisit a decision that you've
Mhm.
made, right? Maybe sometimes you'll learn something along the way that has
Yeah.
you change, the decision, because we all try to make the best decisions that we can with the information that we have. But later on, we might get, other pieces of information. And then let's not detract the value of learning from our lessons. So maybe we actually made a decision that didn't turn out so well. The question
Mm-hmm.
is, what could we learn from that after re-examining it that helps
Mm-hmm.
us do better in the future? There's nothing wrong with making mistakes or even failing.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is if you keep making the same mistake over and over and over again, indicating that you haven't learned anything from it.
Yes, yes. And you've made mention, one of your favorite leaders is John Maxwell. I remembered yesterday I've attended a mastermind, and the title of the program is really more of, what's that? Sometimes you win and sometimes you learn, right? And
Yeah,
that's basically the lesson that you're sharing with us today as well.
absolutely.
Yeah. So that leads me to my last question. I'm enjoying our conversation. I'm getting a lot of juicy stuff from you, but this is my last question.
Okay.
So if you were to ask yourself a question that you can best answer, what would it be?
For me, that one would be just how might I become better tomorrow, right? As I mentioned before, life is a spectrum, leadership is a
Mm-hmm.
spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
What I truly believe is that, we're not in competition with anybody else except ourselves from yesterday. I want to become a better version of me tomorrow than I was today or yesterday. If I worry about what's happening with everyone else, then, I'm taking my eyes off of my game. And if I can actually do that, then who knows who else I might be able to help, who I might inspire. None of us ever has an idea of how many other people are watching us. But if we just
Mm-hmm.
remember that someone is, then, could you do something that might help that other person on their journey? So to me, it's just about becoming better each day.
Wow, that's lovely. I mean, like, for leaders, it's like one of the best character, or how would I say that? This something that, yeah, character, leadership character that you can have, right? Being able to um be a continuous learner and thinking through how you can become, better every day, right?
Yeah.
Wow, so your team is so lucky to have, like, like someone like you as a leader, right? I would say that, right?
Thank you for saying that.
And
Hopefully you feel the same way.
for sure, for sure. I mean, like, and thank you so much for, taking time to have this interview with us. I really personally learned, a lot of things from you, and I really got inspired with the messages that you've shared with us. And I hope that, our listeners or our audience also has learned a lot from you, and that, it's a good reminder for them that really to focus on working on themselves rather than comparing themselves to others, right? Because at the end of the day, it's we walk our own journeys, right? um,
Yes.
we have different experiences, we do have different perspectives, and we walk our own journey, and we have to focus on that to be ourselves, to be our best version of ourselves, right? So yeah,
Absolutely.
so before we end this interview, is there anything more, any other message that you'd like to share with our audience?
Well, I would say just keep learning. This was a really good opportunity for me, so I'd like to
Mhm.
thank you again for it. Certainly, the questions that you ask go into my kit bag of things that I kind of continue to refer back to, because that's the
Mhm.
thing, right? There's so
Mhm.
many things that we have an opportunity to come across. For me, I
Mhm.
look at things that I will read or listen to, and the question for me is, will this change my behavior? Is this something that I
Mhm.
can actually apply? And if it is, then I'm going to use it. If it isn't, then I'm going to spend time looking for the next thing that helps. So I'd appreciate, everybody on this program figuring out, what can you do not only to improve yourself, but also to inspire someone else. And thank
Yeah.
you again, Marilyn, for putting this kind of program on because I think it's really useful.
Thank you. Thank you so much for, for that kind word, I would say. And thank you so much for inspiring us, and, for this very authentic interview that we just have. And I learned so much from you, and for sure, your message will really get to as much people who needs to, hear this, right? Or who needs to watch this, right? So thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. And let's help each other and continue to fight the pandemic that caused challenges, and let's all turn this to opportunities through several interventions that we can help you with as well, like this interview. And do remember that even the richest investors in this world would say that investing in yourself is the best investment you can ever make in your life, right? So with that, we would like to leave you with this quote from Dolly Parton, that if your actions create a legacy that inspires others to dream more, do more, learn more, and become more, then you are an excellent leader. Thank you so much, and bye for now, everyone. Thank you, Hassan.
Thank
I
you.
love your conversation. Thank you.
Take care. Bye bye.